As many of you will have already noticed, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit payments have already started rolling in. Now it's time to budget. A short while ago, I created a guide to help you understand what was going on with the CERB and EI so that you could get the help that you needed. I realized that even if you were able to get this money, you might not be sure how you can make it last as long as possible given these trying times. As I've mentioned before, almost half of Canadians are only $200 away from not being able to meet their monthly expenses and debt obligations. If this was the case before the recession, now I know that a lot of you are having an even more difficult time because you've maybe lost some or all of your income. So I thought it only right that I would also try and provide a blueprint of how you can make the most out of your CERB or EI payments. To do this, we'll go over an emergency budget that you can then take and apply to your own life. The first thing I want to make very clear here is that this budget needs to be either written down or typed out. It will simply not be effective if it's just done in your head. Take this from someone who tries to do literally everything inside their own head, whether it's my calendar, my to-do list, grocery list. I literally try and do everything inside my own head, and more often than not, it just leads to me either forgetting or missing something. What do you think about how I try and have my calendar and everything else inside of my head all the time? What do you think about that?
I think it's silly.
Does it annoy you?
Yeah, it's very annoying. I think it's absurd. I think it's absolutely ludicrous.
So I would recommend either using any of the several great budget templates out there online, creating your own, or using a budgeting software for doing this. Next, we'll need to get our data to fill our budget with. This part is going to involve crunching some numbers. That means dusting off the old calculator or, using the one on your computer. The data that we'll need is our previous expenses, 2 months worth to be exact. So you'll want to log on to your online banking and gather all the expenses you paid in the last 2 months. This will give us enough information to work with as a base for your budget. I know that this part will seem a little daunting, maybe a little bit intimidating or tedious, but if we don't have visibility to these expenses, then we can't manage them because after all, what gets measured gets managed. And if we don't have that visibility, then we can't measure or manage our expenses. Not only will this task help you design this emergency budget for yourself, but I also think that it can lead to valuable insights about your spending habits that you might have not been able to discover before. Once we have visibility on our expenses, the next thing we'll want to do is group them into categories. The first category will be our essential expenses. These are the expenses we have to pay every month that are essential to our lives. This includes housing costs, utility bills, transportation, and food. Second, we'll have any debt obligations that we have to pay. This could be credit card debt payments, student loans, car loans, and more. Lastly, we have our discretionary spending category. These are the expenses that we can more or less choose to spend our money on every month, and would include things like subscriptions, meal delivery, and entertainment. So once you've grouped these previous expenses into these categories, now you have a bird's eye view of your expenses. Hopefully you've learned a few interesting things. But the spending summary we just created is based on our data before the crisis took place. Now it's time to incorporate the income that we're receiving from either the Canada Emergency Response Benefit or from employment insurance. We can think of our 3 expense categories as going from most important to least important, with essential expenses being at the top and discretionary spending being at the bottom. We absolutely need to keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies right now, but maybe we don't really need Uber Eats this weekend. So the very first thing to do now is to do the first pass over the budget. And in our first pass, we'll pretend that we're going to completely eliminate all discretionary spending. But don't worry, This is just the first pass. We'll add things back in later if possible. The reason we first want to imagine that we eliminated all discretionary spending is to see how much we're spending on just our essentials and our debt obligations. This will allow us to see what shape we're in at this point, and if we still have some money left over, then that means that we can probably allocate it to some discretionary spending. But if our essential expenses and debt obligations are higher than our income right now, or if maybe they're a little bit too close to our income for our liking, then we'll have to see what we can do to bring these expenses down. With about 1 million Canadians applying for unemployment benefits within the first week, many companies such as banks, utility providers, and insurance companies are being much more lenient right now. The most important thing to keep in mind here is that if you want help, you have to ask. While these companies may be willing to work with you if you give them a call, you most likely won't be getting any help if you don't reach out. So if you're a homeowner and you're really in a pinch over your mortgage, consider giving your bank a call. The big 6 banks in Canada have stated that they are willing to work with Canadians on a case-by-case basis with their mortgages. Just be sure that you understand any interest implications of any agreement that you come to with your bank. If you happen to be somebody who's renting a home, then the person you need to reach out to is your landlord. Landlords are also likely to be in a financial pinch right now, but everyone will benefit from communicating and working together. Reach out to your landlord and see if there's any agreement you can possibly work out together. Next, consider giving your utility provider a call. Many providers throughout Canada have already reduced rates on hydro bills and similar things, but it could be worth trying to get someone on the phone to talk about potentially delaying or skipping payments if you absolutely need to. Finally, give your insurance company a call. There have been many reports of Canadians reaching out to their car insurance providers and having their rates reduced drastically because they aren't really driving anywhere right now. If you're not commuting to work right now, then you may be driving way less kilometers. I've even seen some people get their rates cut in half. I even tried to see what I could do.
How can I help you today?
I'm just calling to inquire about basically the automobile insurance that I have. I understand that since, because of the situation going on right now with the quarantine and stuff like that, I'm not driving basically at all right now.
Get the groceries and
Yeah.
clothing, right?
Yeah. So I was wondering if there's any chance that we could take a look at like the car insurance policy and if there's any way that the rate could be lowered because of the big decrease in like kilometers driven.
Right, yeah. We can definitely take a look into the usage you have on your vehicles, and we can amend that if needed. But having said that, the usage might not do a huge difference in your premiums either. But definitely, if you're having any trouble making the payment, we are more than happy to help you out with those payments. We are deferring payments, and if you have a suspension, if you get cancelled for non-payment, we wouldn't cancel policies anymore for non-payment. So we have so many other options in place, but not really a rate cut.
All right, so the guy helping me there basically said that the reduced kilometers is probably not going to make a huge difference to your insurance premium, but he did mention that they are more than happy to work with you if you need to delay or postpone or whatever, miss a payment. He essentially said that they have different options in place right now, so it's still worth a call to your insurance provider to talk about that. If you are really strapped, you might be able to work out some kind of payment plan with them. By taking the time to make these few phone calls, you can potentially make a really big impact on your essential expenses. And making an impact on expenses like these is great because these expenses happen every month. So if you can save money on them, that means that you'll save that little bit of money every single month. And don't just stop at essential expenses. Also make sure to reach out to your bank to talk about any credit card debt or loans you have with them. The big 6 banks in Canada have said not only that they'll work with customers on mortgages, but also on other credit products. It's worth a shot to see if they can cut you any slack. But again, Just make sure that you fully understand the implications of things like interest accrual on any agreement that you make with your bank. On top of that, remember that student loans are also put on hold right now, which means you won't need to make a payment and you won't be charged interest for this period of time. If you're a student, take advantage of this opportunity if you need to. At this point, we've trimmed our essential expenses down as much as we can, and we've hopefully been able to lessen our debt obligations. If we still have money left over, now is when we can begin adding back discretionary spending very carefully. Ideally, we only want to add back in that little bit of discretionary spending that keeps us sane right now. Maybe that means something like a Netflix subscription, or maybe that means something else. But at the end of the day, you're probably still going to have to sacrifice much of the discretionary spending that you had before. But the strategy here is that you want to give yourself at least a little bit of freedom if you can, because a lot of people just kind of hold in that pent-up desire to spend their money on something, and then they end up making a really large purchase that didn't make sense to do. So allowing yourself that little bit of freedom to keep yourself sane, I think, is pretty important in these times. Just make sure that it's done strategically and intentionally. With that being said, if possible, right now, one of the main things that you can try and achieve is just having a little bit of cash left over after every month. Having even just a small cushion of cash right now can provide you with so much peace of mind and security. Also, if you have any cash reserves right now, now is the time to use them. Using cash instead of tapping a credit card or pulling money out of investments is the right move to make right now. I know it can hurt to have to call upon some cash that you've had tucked away in a savings account, that you were looking at your bank account and just being happy knowing it was there, but it's much better to use that cash right now instead of saddling yourself up with high interest debt or selling your investments at a low price. If you're new to this channel, it might be worthwhile to take a peek at some of the previous videos that I've done. I've done a few videos that cover the psychology and the practicality of saving money, and those might be of use to you right now. I realize that Canadians specifically have been lacking a good resource when it comes to managing your own finance. I created Cash College with the intention of being that resource. So far, it seems like it's been going pretty well. I mean, the feedback from you guys has been just amazing. I want to continue to improve this so that we can learn and grow together. So if there's any things that you'd like to learn more about, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear about what you'd like to know more about money and how we can explore it together. If I see a suggestion that I think will benefit enough people, I'll try my best to make it happen. Pretty soon, I'd like to start covering some topics related to economics. Now, I'm not an economist, but I'd at least like to give you guys a general overview of the economic forces that have kind of shaped the position that we find ourselves in right now, so that you guys can understand it better. I know that when words like quantitative easing or fiscal policy get thrown around, that people's eyes tend to kind of glaze over, but I really want to present this topic in a much more engaging and approachable way. If that's something that interests you, then consider subscribing if you're not already. And if you are subscribed, make sure to hit the little bell icon so that you turn notifications on. I've been putting a lot of work into this project, and it would mean so much to me if you did. And with all that being said, I'm Steve Antonioni, and this has been Cash College on building an emergency budget. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.